was stunned. Helen, my wife of 24 years, just left the house to spend the weekend with one of her co-workers, Ray Bland. She didn't say she loved me. She didn't even call it just sex. She didn't give me a kiss, just a pat on the head like I was a dog. How cruel could she be? And what would happen next? The thoughts made me shiver. I should start from the beginning. We got married when we were 22, 24 years ago. I had just finished my IT degree and started a new job. Helen was still studying and later got her law degree. I supported her through those tough years and felt happy to do it. She was my soulmate, the love of my life. I believed our struggles then would be worth it in the end. So I saved money and did everything I could to help her. After she graduated, a big law firm hired her. She became known as a tough lawyer who won most of her cases. She made more money than me, but that didn't matter. I was proud of her. We talked about having kids and decided to wait. Eventually, she told me she didn't want children at all, so we didn't have any. We were what people call dinks. Double income, no kids. I didn't even know what birth control she used. That felt pretty sad. Since we rarely used protection, I assumed she had it covered. Even if she had gotten pregnant, I was sure she would have ended the pregnancy without telling me. I resented that deep down, but tried to enjoy life. While I wanted a child, I was now glad we never had any. Helen had always been the boss in our relationship. I didn't mind because I loved putting her needs first. That worked, or seemed to work, for a long time. But recently she changed. Maybe it was her hormones. Her desire for sex increased a lot over the past few months. I didn't complain. I enjoyed it. Last night, though, she shocked me. Right after we were in bed together, "I'm going out with Ray Bland tomorrow. Dinner, dancing, and sex at the hotel. I'll come back Sunday," she said without any guilt, like she was just getting the car serviced. What? Why? I asked, feeling stupid. Am I not enough anymore? True, she said, but right now no one man would be enough. We can still have fun, but I need new experiences. Arguing with her was pointless. She had made up her mind and expected me to go along, just like always. I felt a cold emptiness where my heart should be, dreading the pain to come. I said nothing, just showered, and went to bed without kissing her goodnight. The next morning I didn't speak as we got ready for work. For the first time in 24 years, I didn't kiss her goodbye or tell her I loved her. I didn't care if she noticed. She was already dead to me. At work, I was like a zombie. All I could think about was what Helen planned to do. I had read enough stories to know what might come next. No way was I going to put up with that. I also knew what to expect from a divorce. She would get most of everything. I was angry about that. Arguing with Helen would only make her more stubborn. Running away seemed impossible. If she had told me a month, even a couple of weeks ago, I could have left everything. Good people can get jobs anywhere, and I knew I was good. But with such little notice, I felt trapped. There was only one way to handle this, I thought. Someone would have to die. When she came home that evening, she said nothing and got ready for her date. As she showered and dressed, I took my .45 caliber pistol and loaded it. My plan was simple. When Ray came to the door, I would shoot him. I hoped Helen would see it happen. I knew I'd probably go to jail for life. I didn't care, but it didn't go that way. When Ray arrived in his car, he just honked. He didn't even come to the door. Helen patted me on the head like a dog as she left. She didn't see the loaded pistol hidden on the couch. I said nothing but felt a deep rage as she walked out with her overnight bag. I hated myself then. Despite everything she was doing to us, I couldn't shoot her. Running out and shooting at the car felt like something out of a bad movie. After they left, I grabbed my laptop. I thought about our life together for a long time. Looking through my photo gallery, I remembered our trips to Cancun and Paris, and the cruise we took in the Caribbean for our 10th anniversary. We both looked so happy in those pictures. None of that means anything to me now. Unlike Helen, I had no real support system, no family or friends I could rely on. My sister died young and my brother died in a stupid fraternity prank. My father died a few years ago. Helen didn't come to the funeral, saying she hated funerals and had important work. Mom got worse after Dad passed, but lived on her own until she died 2 years ago. I called her once a month before she died and sent her cards because I knew Helen wouldn't. Mom was sad she wouldn't have grandkids to spoil. I went to her funeral by myself. Again. I also had a strange uncle who moved to the Australian outback over 10 years ago. I never heard from him, though Mom talked about him sometimes. I had people I worked with and was friendly with, but no close friends I could confide in, share a drink with after work, watch a game with, or go fishing with. I cursed myself for building my world around my unfaithful wife. I logged into our joint bank account and made some changes. Helen had her own account, and so did I. That was our agreement when we first married. She also had her own credit card. Then I logged on to her law firm's website. I sent an email to everyone I could find on the firm's website, including her boss, explaining what she and Ray had done. I knew they probably wouldn't see the email until Monday, but that was fine by me. Then I wrote a short note to Helen and left it under my wedding ring on the coffee table. I shut down my laptop, put it away, and sat on the couch, remembering the good times. It took a while to find the courage, and I wished I had found it sooner, but I finally picked up the pistol and held it to my head. "I'm sorry, Mom and Dad. I hope to see you soon," I whispered before pulling the trigger. Helen. I had all my shots, and he said he was clean, so I enjoyed my freedom. We'd been fooling around in Ray's fancy apartment for over an hour, after spending the evening drinking, dancing, and flirting. "Bet your husband couldn't make you feel like that," Ray boasted as he lay next to me on the bed. I hadn't thought of Terry since I left the house on Friday. I didn't like Ray talking bad about him, but he was right. There was a time when Terry could keep up all night, but those days were long gone. Sure, Terry was always warm and loving, but sometimes a girl needs something else, I thought. "To be honest, I haven't thought of him at all this weekend," I said. "You made me forget about him. And don't forget, he's a few years older than you. Have you thought more about what we talked about?" "You mean doing this in front of your husband?" Ray asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yes," I said, "just to show him how things will be from now on. Don't worry, it will be fine. Terry's harmless. He didn't even try to stop me when I left the house Friday night." "Well, harmless people can get dangerous if pushed too hard. Remember the Connors case?" Ray warned. "You said he didn't try to stop you. Did he say anything?" "No," I said. "He just sat there on the couch. Actually, he hasn't said much since I told him on Thursday night," I added. "Has he called or texted you?" Ray asked. "No, he hasn't. Don't you find that strange?" "Not really," I told him. "I made it clear this is what I need. He knows how I am once I decide something." "Either that or he's already left you," Ray said. "He wouldn't dare leave me," I said with a laugh. "He knows I love him and this is just about sex." Ray looked at me as if to say, "What's wrong with you?" He softened his expression. "If you say so," he said. "Now why don't you come here one more time?" "Not until you promise to help me set things straight with him tomorrow evening," I said, taking hold of him. Even soft, Ray's size was more than Terry's at his best. "All right," Ray agreed. "I'll help you set things straight tomorrow. Now get up here one more time." We pulled into my driveway late Sunday afternoon. The house seemed quiet, almost too quiet. I saw the yard hadn't been mowed. Terry always mowed on Saturdays. I made a note to talk to him about it. I expected that nothing would change with my new arrangement. "Are you ready for this?" Ray asked. "Sure." I flipped up my skirt to show him I had no underwear on. I was ready. "Let's do this. Do you need any help getting ready? I did keep you busy all weekend." He just looked at me and smiled. I saw he was ready. "Don't say anything to him. I'll do the talking and you do the rest," I told him as I opened the car door. I grabbed my overnight bag and walked to the door. Ray was right behind me. I put the key in the lock and turned it. At least Terry hadn't changed the locks yet, I thought. I opened the door a bit and was hit by a horrible smell. "What is that?" I covered my mouth and peeked inside. What I saw made me feel sick. I quickly closed the door and ran to the yard where I threw up. "What's going on? Are you okay?" Ray asked as he came to my side. "It's Terry," I said after I stopped throwing up. "He's dead." "What, dead?" Ray almost yelled. "Are you sure?" I glared at him. "I'm sure. Half of his head is gone and my new couch is ruined. There's blood and stuff all over it. What do I do?" "You should call 911, Ray said, his voice shaky. "No kidding, Captain Obvious," I told him sarcastically. He flinched, but then looked at me like I had just turned into a snake. "I'm sorry, Ray. I didn't mean to snap at you. I just wasn't expecting this. Could you stay with me until the cops get here?" I reached out and touched his arm to steady us both. "I guess I can stay for a bit," he said reluctantly. "But this is your problem. You need to clean it up." "Thanks," I said with a snort as I pulled my phone out of my purse. Jerk, I thought as I dialed 911. The operator said calmly that officers were on their way and should be there within the hour. She told me to stay outside the house until they arrived. Given the smell, I was glad to follow her advice. We sat in Ray's car to wait for the cops, and then it hit me. Terry was dead. All I wanted was some extra fun. I didn't want this. I wanted everything else to stay the same. I wanted him to be there for me when I got older. As the realization hit me, I started crying. Ray held me as I cried for Terry. You know you have to call Bledsoe, Ray said after a while. It will be in the paper. Neighbors will talk. You'll need to do an obituary. Even if you cremate him quickly, people will know. And the firm doesn't like surprises. I know, I said. Wilson Bledsoe was the boss at our law firm. You should call him now before the police get here, Ray suggested. You're right, I said, trying to stay calm. I was a lawyer, I reminded myself. I grabbed my underwear from my purse and put them on quickly, looking around to make sure no one saw. Then I pulled out my phone and called Bledsoe's home number. He answered after the third ring. Good evening, Helen, he said in his usual slow voice. What can I do for you? Mr. Bledsoe, my husband is dead. It looks like he killed himself, I said, my voice shaky. Well, that explains why he didn't reply to my email, Wilson said in the same slow voice. Email? I asked, wondering why my boss would email Terry. Yes, I got a disturbing email from him Friday evening. I replied as soon as I saw it. Is it true? Is what true, sir? I asked, alarmed. That you spent the weekend with Ray Bland. Intimately, is it true? He asked, in the same serious tone he used in court. Yes, sir. It's true, I said, now scared for my job. The firm had a morals clause, and I knew I could get fired for what I had done. I also knew lying would make things worse. I'm very sorry to hear that, Helen. I'm also sorry about your husband. Have you called the police yet? Yes, sir, I have, I replied. You'll be busy for a few days. Why don't you take the week off and deal with your husband's death? We'll talk about your actions and your future with this firm when you return. But I have the Wilson case, I protested. Jenny Hawkins is your second on that case, isn't she? Wilson asked. He knew very well she was. He had assigned her. Yes, sir, she is, I said, feeling my arm go numb. Jenny is a good lawyer. I'll have her file a continuation so she can catch up. You need to focus on your husband's final arrangements. But I must say, Helen, I am very disappointed in you. I understand, sir, I said, gulping nervously. Is Mr. Bland with you now? Wilson asked. His tone didn't change during the call, and it felt cold, like a doctor describing a wound. Yes, sir, he is, I replied. Tell him to report to my office first thing in the morning, Wilson ordered. This was definitely an order that couldn't be ignored. Yes, sir, I'll tell him, I said. Thank you. Please accept my condolences, Helen. We'll talk later. Good day, Wilson said before ending the call. I felt stunned. It was like he got calls like this every day. I shook myself, put the phone away, and looked at Ray sadly. Well? Ray asked nervously. Mr. Bledsoe wants to see you first thing in the morning. Apparently Terry emailed him about us, I replied. My world was falling apart and I couldn't stop it. Why had Terry done this to me? Shit, Ray whispered. We're in serious trouble, I said, finishing his thought. Maybe, Ray replied. Maybe not. Since we've been here longer and this is a first offense, they might show us some mercy. Do you really believe that? I asked. Not much. But I can hope. Helen, I'm really sorry. Me too, Ray. We're both at fault here, I admitted. I had no idea he would react like this. Suddenly, 2 police cars with flashing lights pulled up in front of the house, and a coroner's van arrived right behind them. One officer came to Ray's side of the car and asked him to move so the van could back in. Another officer carrying a clipboard asked me to step out of the car. I got out as Ray started his car. Are you Miss Helen Baker? The officer asked. Yes, I am, I admitted. May I see some identification, please? He asked. I pulled out my driver's license and handed it to him. He wrote down information as he looked at my license. I saw 3 officers and 2 people from the medical examiner's office go into the house. They all put on gloves and white shoe covers. The officers looked disgusted when they opened the door and smelled the air inside. The medical examiners put on masks and full-body suits before taking a gurney into the house. Can you tell me what happened, Mrs. Baker? The officer asked. I left the house on Friday afternoon. Terry was alive and sitting on the couch when I left. I don't know what happened after that. I just got back shortly before I called 911, I explained. Terry, that's your husband? The victim? The officer asked. Yes, I said. And you say you've been gone all weekend? He asked, raising his eyebrows. I nodded again as the officer took notes. And what were you doing this weekend? He asked in a flat voice. I was with a friend, I answered, feeling uncomfortable. His eyebrows went up again as he wrote on his clipboard. I felt annoyed and my stomach twisted. It was one thing to tell my husband, but admitting it to a stranger was much harder. Is that the gentleman you were with when we arrived? The officer asked. Yes, I confirmed, trying to stay calm but failing. I've attended hundreds of depositions and even given a few, but this was the first time something like this involved me. He tried to hide it, but I could tell he guessed what was going on. He asked me a few more questions, which I answered briefly. It took him another 20 minutes to finish my statement. I tried to avoid saying too much, but the officer stayed focused. I felt my face turn red as I had to admit that I was at the city's nicest nightclub from Friday evening until late Friday night. Then, I stayed at a fancy apartment complex from late Friday night to Sunday afternoon. I even had to say the apartment number. What could I do? Plead the fifth? Ask for my lawyer? He was just taking my statement at what might be a crime scene. I was just a bystander, even if I was involved. That's all I need for now, Mrs. Baker, he said. I need to speak with your friend, now. He walked over to talk to Ray. He passed the spot where I had thrown up on the lawn, paused to note it, and then continued. I looked around. It was evening, but still light outside. I could see neighbors standing at their windows staring at the scene. Some had even walked to the end of their driveways to watch. Damn it! Did it have to be so public? Maybe I should have just stayed with Ray longer and come back after dark. A few minutes later, I saw the medical examiners come out with a gurney holding Terry's body in a closed bag. I shivered, but couldn't look away. They put the gurney in the van, closed the door, and took off their suits. They carefully put the suits in a plastic bag, then got into the van and left. The officers followed them out, and a man wearing sergeant stripes walked toward me with 2 plastic bags. Mrs. Baker, I'm Sergeant Smith, he said. We found this near your husband's body. Did you know he had this gun? He asked, holding a bag with Terry's pistol. Yes, I knew, I replied. It was a gift from his grandfather. He had it for years. I felt shaky. Before, it had just been a piece of metal out of sight. Now I saw it as the deadly weapon it was. I suddenly wondered if Terry had taken it out after I left, or if he had it when I left, intending to use it on Ray or even me before turning it on himself. All those stories of murder-suicides on the news that I had barely paid attention to now overwhelmed me. Terry loved me, didn't he? He let me have anything I wanted. Why not this? We also found this on the coffee table, the sergeant said, showing a bag with a piece of paper. He apparently intended it for you. I took the bag from the sergeant and saw a typed note and Terry's wedding ring. Shaking, I read the note through the plastic. Helen, I would rather die than be your laughingstock. I have loved you only for 25 years and always put you first, and this is how you repay me. Well, forget you, you selfish, no-good woman. I pulled the trigger, but my blood is on your hands. When you left to be with Ray Bland for the weekend, you killed our marriage. You killed me. I hope you live a long, sad life and that you see my dead body every time you close your eyes. The short note ended. Rot in hell. I gave the note back to the sergeant, my hands shaking. He needed it to finish his report. My knees felt weak, but they didn't give out. If I wasn't in shock before, I was now. I thought about what Terry had written. He had never spoken like that around me, and his letter shook me up. To be honest, I never knew he could feel that way. Maybe if he had said this to me on Thursday when I told him what I was going to do, I wouldn't have left, and Terry would still be alive, but maybe wasn't good enough. I can't deal with what-ifs. I'm a lawyer, so I have to handle things as they are, even if I cause them. I took a couple of deep breaths to calm down and looked at the sergeant. Doubt and questions were part of my job, but my own doubt was scattered in a pool on my front lawn, and any jury I faced wouldn't be kind. Can I go back into my house now? I asked. We're still working on the scene, ma'am. It's not good in there. Our coroner thinks your husband died Friday evening. I don't think you should stay here for a while. I've called a cleaning service, and they should be here soon. If I were you, I'd go to a hotel until Tuesday or Wednesday. Can I at least get my computer and some clothes? I asked, trying to sound professional. When we're done, the sergeant said. That could take another hour. He looked at me for a while, then handed me a card. I know this is a shock. You should talk to someone. I recommend Gina Hastings. She's a good counselor. We send our officers to her when they have a rough time on the job. Tell her I sent you, and she should see you soon. Thank you, Sergeant Smith, I replied, feeling annoyed at the idea of needing a counselor. I'll think about it. His face was hard to read, but I could sense his concern. I was standing there, shaking like a leaf. Your choice, ma'am, but I think you should call her soon. If not her, then a pastor or a good friend, the sergeant said before going back inside. Sighing, I walked to the porch and sat on the bench Terry put up last summer. It was something I had asked him to do. We had only used that bench once since he put it up. I thought about what Terry wrote. Even with my eyes closed, I could still see his words. A few minutes later, Ray walked up and sat next to me, but not too close. I looked around. Most of the neighbors had gone inside or closed their curtains after the van left. A few curious ones lingered. What did they want? I asked quietly. They asked about our weekend, Ray replied with a sigh. You told them everything? I looked at him, too numb to be angry. Pretty much. Just a short version, Ray said. What did the sergeant want? Terry wrote a suicide note, I said flatly. Crying about how much he loved you? Ray asked sarcastically. No. He said what he should have told me Thursday night. Called me selfish and said his death is my fault. And you know what? What? Ray asked. He's right, I am selfish, and his death is on me. You can't blame yourself, he did it, not you, Ray replied, trying to be comforting. You have a right to make your own choices. You're right, I do, I whispered, thinking about Terry's letter, and I have to face the results of my choices. Ray looked at me for a moment, then kept talking. I've been thinking about this, and I know how to handle Bledsoe tomorrow. With me divorced and you now alone, there's no reason for the firm to worry about lawsuits. What happened between us is personal and won't make the news. It's not political or social scandal, just a matter between adults. It won't be a big deal and will be forgotten soon. So it wouldn't be smart for the firm to fire us. If we both say the same thing, that will help. I'll call you after the meeting tomorrow and let you know so we can plan. I looked at him. Terry was just a small thing. The man who treated me well was just a small thing. The man I treated poorly was now just a small thing. Ray wanted to save his job, and he didn't know I just wanted to save my sanity. I thought about his words for a bit. Technically, he was right. There was no big scandal. But Bledsoe was strict about the firm's rules, especially about relationships at work. Let me know what Bledsoe says, I finally said. I will. Will you be okay? Ray asked. I'll manage, I said blankly. The truth was, I doubted I would ever be okay again. I was determined not to let Ray know my true feelings. Call me if you need anything, Ray said before leaving. Yeah, okay, I muttered as he walked away. Soon after Ray drove off, a plain white van pulled into the driveway. A young man with shoulder-length blonde hair stepped out and came up to the porch. Is this the Baker residence? He asked. Yes, I replied. And you are? Jack Harrison, Harrison Cleaning Services. I was told there was an incident here. He replied professionally, handing me a card. Yes, I said quietly. The police are still inside. Thank you. He nodded. I watched him put on a mask, booties, and gloves before going in. A few minutes later, Jack and the police officers came out. Sergeant Smith approached me as the others walked to their cars. We're finished here, Mrs. Baker, he said. Here's my card with the case number on the back. I'll have a report ready in a day or two. If you have questions, call me. Thank you. Can I get my things now? I asked. Sure, but put on a mask and booties before you go inside, the sergeant said. Mr. Harrison has some you can use. Thank you, I said, taking his card and putting it in my purse. Jack approached with a pair of booties and a fresh mask. The officers left as I put on the mask and booties. Jack opened a small jar of mentholatum. Put some of this under your nose. It still smells pretty bad in there, he advised. I did as he said and went into the house. The ointment helped, but I could still smell the awful odor. I looked at the large sectional couch. It was a mess and would need replacing. I'd spent over $6,000 on that couch, and it wasn't even 8 months old. Then I saw the abstract painting hanging over the couch. I had paid over $2,000 for it. Now it was ruined, covered with Terry's blood. The carpet in front of the couch was soaked with blood and other stuff that made me shudder. I can try to clean the carpet. Hopefully the pad underneath isn't too bad. I'm not sure I can save the couch, but I'll try, Jack assured me. Please do, I said quietly. How long will you be here? It'll probably take me most of the night. Can I call or leave a message when I leave? Yeah, I said, handing him one of my cards with my cell phone number. Lock up when you leave, please. I felt like I was taking a risk leaving him alone, but I needed to get out. Besides, his card said he was licensed and insured. Yes, ma'am, he responded politely, taking my card and putting it in a pocket. I went upstairs, packed enough for 3 days, grabbed my laptop bag, and quickly left the house before my stomach could get upset again. Jack was already hard at work in the front room. I told him I was leaving, and he waved as I walked to the garage through the kitchen. I arrived at the Holiday Inn Express near our house and went inside, hoping for a room. Luckily, they had one. I handed the clerk my ATM card. She returned a few moments later with a slight frown. I'm sorry, ma'am, but this card was declined, she said, handing the card back to me. What? I asked, shocked. We always kept enough in our joint account to cover at least 6 months' worth of bills. I would have to check this, I thought, as I grabbed my credit card, which had enough balance to cover the room. That card worked, and I went up to my room. I was angry that our ATM card didn't work and was determined to find out why. The first thing I did was log into our joint account. If Terry were still alive, I would have been furious with him. I saw an alert that the account balance was low. I nearly lost it again when I saw the balance. $24. What had Terry done? Digging deeper, I saw that he had donated all but $24 to children's charities, including a local church-run orphanage. I was sure this was his way of showing he was unhappy that I decided not to have children. But why leave $24 out of the thousands we had? My immediate concern was covering the bills due this month. All of our bills were paid automatically, so I transferred enough from my account to cover this month's bills. I wondered if Terry had done something similar with his account. I didn't have the login info, so I made a note to stop by the bank tomorrow. I was exhausted, both mentally and physically. I was also hungry, having not eaten since lunch, so I drove to a nearby fast food place and ate a greasy hamburger that didn't sit well with my already upset stomach. After returning to my room, I showered and got ready for bed. I was so tired that I fell asleep as soon as my head hit the pillow. Well, 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 I see you finally decided to come back, a male voice said. I looked around but saw nothing but a thick, dark mist. I realized I was dreaming and the voice sounded like Terry's. Only this wasn't the gentle Terry I knew. This voice had an edge to it. Terry, is that you? I asked uncertainly. I can't see you. Can you step out so I can see you? Please? Sure, the male voice replied. I saw a shadowy figure step forward. I nearly threw up when I saw him. Half of his head was gone. Bone fragments dropped off his skull as he walked toward me, and I could see what was left of his brain. I was horrified and took a step back. Then I shook myself. This had to be a nightmare. It had to be. No. No! This isn't happening. You can't be real, I shouted, though my voice shook. You're just a bad dream from that awful burger I ate before bed. You're more grease than ghost. He moved toward me, his eyes glowing red. The stench hit me first. Then his burning eyes almost blinded me, and his roar made me jump back, dropping to one knee with my arms over my head. Okay, okay, I yelled wildly. You're real! You better believe it, you pathetic excuse for a wife, he growled. Terry, I started, but he cut me off with a wave of his hand. Shut up. This is all on you. What do you think? He turned, showing a wound on the side of his head. It looks a bit like that pricey painting you just had to have over the couch. I thought you liked that painting, I said weakly, confused by his anger. I hated it, but it made you happy, so I went along with it. just like I went along with everything else, even when you got tired of me. So tell me, was being with Ray Bland worth it? I looked down, ashamed. I didn't want to lose Terry, but the truth was I had enjoyed being with Ray. You don't need to say anything. I can see your thoughts here, Helen, he said coldly. My face grew hot. I looked away, but he was everywhere I turned. I read your note, I stammered, trying to change the subject. Why didn't you say all that on Thursday when I told you about Ray? Would it have made a difference? Terry asked, as if he already knew the answer. Probably not. I don't know. We'll never know now, will we? I forced out, hating how defensive I sounded. I think we both do, Terry sneered. What did you do with our money? I asked, eager for a new topic. My anger started to rise. The bills still need to be paid. You're smart. Figure it out, he said with a shrug of his gore-stained shoulders. I know you gave it all to kids' charities. Why? My anger was growing. What do you care? You didn't want kids even though you knew I did. I thought it should go to kids who need it. If I couldn't give it to my own, at least some good would come from it. But what about me? You knew how I felt about having kids, I protested, furious. Yes, you made it clear. You didn't want a career and kids. You didn't want to lose your figure. Always your way, just like with Ray. How's that working out for you? At least I'm alive. I didn't take the coward's way out, I shot back. His eyes flamed red, and I hoped this was just a cruel dream. If not, I was in big trouble. The coward's way out? Do you think it was easy to shoot myself? It was the second hardest thing I ever did. Do you know what the hardest was? He snarled, his voice like an angry wolf. No. What? I asked, startled. Watching you leave to be with Ray, Terry growled, after 24 years of loyalty. I told you it was just one weekend. I told you I love you. You knew I would be back, I said desperately. Yes, that's what you said. Do you remember what you did before you left? No. What? I asked. You patted me on the head, like a pet. You thought I'd be okay with that. I don't remember that, but I was showing love, I protested. Terry laughed, a cold, chilling laugh. Sure. You expect me to believe that? It's true, I didn't mean to hurt you. It was just one weekend, and then we'd have the rest of our lives together, I insisted. Did you think I'd want to be with you after that? Knowing what you did, and would do again? You're crazy. I'd rather die than be your fool. How do you know that? I asked. Your thoughts are clear here. Look. He pointed to his right. I couldn't help it. My eyes followed his gesture. A cloud of swirling mist appeared and turned into a large silver disk. A cold, terrifying wave ran through me, and I whimpered. An image formed on the disk, like a window to another world. At first, I thought I was watching a bad movie, but then I realized it was me. I was on all fours with Ray behind me. I heard myself mocking Terry, who stood crying. Oh, God! Was that really how I saw Terry when I thought that? I heard a gurgle of pain right behind my left ear. I couldn't turn to look. I felt like ice claws were tearing me inside as I realized my husband was behind me. I let out a small yelp of pure, cold fear and tried to deny what I had planned, pushing it away in my mind. But then I realized something worse. I was the main person in this filthy scene. I stared at my limp, naked body on a big bed, covered in sticky white stuff. Ray and 3 other men were standing around me, all naked and tired out. Part of me was disgusted. Another part was horrified that some part of me felt excited by it. The me in the picture cursed Terry for not being as good as these men and then told the faceless figures to come at me again. That never happened, I protested hoarsely as I watched this awful scene on the screen. No, but you and Ray talked about it, planned it, Terry said. You might as well have done it. What excuse were you going to give me for that, Were you going to say it would be just a one-time thing? That you need more than one man to feel like a woman? I looked at Terry, shocked. How could he know about this? Yes, Ray and I had talked about it, but we never made real plans. Really. But none of it happened, I insisted. Doesn't matter. Here, thinking and talking about something is the same as doing it, Terry replied. And what is this? Heaven? I asked sarcastically. This? Terry asked, looking around. Not at all. And it's not the other place either. This is just a meeting spot between your reality and mine, Terry explained. Just then I heard a loud ding. and a red light began flashing through the mist. "What was that?" I asked. "Our time is up. I need to go back," Terry said. "Don't worry, we'll talk again, I'm sure." "Wait, I have a question," I pleaded. "Only one?" Terry shot back sarcastically. "For now. Why did you leave $24 in the account?" "You're a smart woman, counselor. You figure it out," Terry hissed. "See ya," he added before he turned his back on me. I sat up in bed, my body covered in sweat. Sunlight came into the hotel room. I looked at the clock. 8:30 a.m. Damn. I knew I had fallen asleep last night, but it felt like I had just run a marathon. Exhausted, I stumbled into the small bathroom and did my business, then looked at myself in the mirror. Dark bags hung under my bloodshot eyes, and my face looked more wrinkled than ever. I'm only 46 years old, but the face in the mirror looked at least 10 years older. I remembered Terry telling me so many times I looked 10 years younger than my age and sighed heavily. I had a full day ahead of me, so I showered and then dressed in jeans and a plain blouse. After checking myself one last time, I went downstairs to get some breakfast and a much-needed cup of coffee. Today was the first day of the rest of my messed-up life. I just didn't know yet how messed up it would be. I walked into the small dining area and picked up the morning paper. I was curious to see if there were any reports of Terry's suicide. After grabbing a light breakfast and a cup of coffee, I sat in a corner out of sight and opened the paper. There was a small note on page 2. It said Terry Baker had apparently shot himself and was survived by his wife, but my name wasn't mentioned. That made me feel a bit better. The last thing I needed was a lot of unwanted attention. I finished my breakfast and walked to my car. I heard my phone ring when I got into my car. I took it out of my purse and saw it was Ray calling. I remembered that Wilson Bledsoe wanted to see him early this morning, so I answered the call. "Hello, Ray," I said. "How did it go?" "About like I expected," Ray answered tiredly. "They put me on leave while they investigate and decide my fate. They have rules for this sort of thing they have to follow, but it doesn't look good." "When will you know the result?" I asked. "Sometime in the next 2 weeks," Ray said. "But I'm not just sitting around. I'll be looking for other options. How are you holding up?" he added, almost as an afterthought. "I'll be all right," I said, trying to sound brave. I didn't want to talk about last night's disturbing nightmare which still haunted me. Then another thought hit me. "By the way, does anyone else at the office know?" "Only everyone with an internal email address," Ray said, exasperated. "It seems Terry told everyone." Crap, I sighed, seeing my career and reputation swirling down the drain. "Anyway, no use hiding it now. Do you want to get together for lunch or something?" he asked, sounding a bit hopeful. I stared at the phone for a moment. It was almost like I could read his mind. He was on leave with not much to do but look for a job and spend time with me. I had just had my life turned upside down. Finally, I broke the tense silence. "I have a lot to do today, so I don't think I'll have time. Besides, I don't think that would be wise right now, do you?" I asked seriously. "You're probably right. I'd better let you go. Call if you need anything," Ray said. We ended the call and I checked my messages out of curiosity. I saw a text from Jack letting me know he was leaving the house. The message was sent at 5:30 this morning, meaning he had been there all night. I saw another message from my older sister, Janice. "I saw the paper this morning." "Was it your Terry who took his own life?" Janice's message asked. "Yes," I typed back. "I'll call and explain later." Janice was older than me by 2 years, and she often acted like a big sister. I wasn't ready to talk about it right then. I drove home and parked in the garage. When I entered through the kitchen door, the smell of cleaning fluids hit me. It was strong, but at least it covered the awful smell from before. I held my breath a little, not wanting to breathe it in too deeply. In the front room, I saw the couch looked almost new. That was a relief. I wouldn't need to buy a new one, but I knew I'd never sit on it again. I felt a bit angry at Terry for choosing the couch instead of his chair. I did notice that the painting above the couch was still in good shape. Jack had cleaned up well. Feeling pleased with Jack's work, I went upstairs to our home office. I gathered important papers, Terry's bank info, our wills, and mortgage insurance. I put them all in my briefcase. The house felt too quiet without Terry. I could hear the ticking of the grandfather clock downstairs. For a moment, I smelled something bad and felt a chill. I almost ran out of the room, but forced myself to stay and keep working. I remembered I needed to inform Terry's work about his death. I played the messages on his desk phone. They were all from his office, asking where he was. I called back and spoke to Allison Jones, his boss. "Helen, we've been so worried. Is Terry okay?" she asked. "No, Allison, he's not. He passed away," I said, trying to stay calm. "Oh no, what happened?" she asked, clearly shocked. "He shot himself," I said slowly, still surprised at how steady my voice was. "When did this happen?" "Friday night. I was out for the weekend," I replied, hoping she wouldn't ask more. "I'm so sorry, Helen. Let us know about the memorial. We all want to be there," Allison said, "and we'll get in touch about his insurance and 401k. Call us if you need anything." "Thank you, Allison," I said, relieved she hadn't pressed for more information. We said our goodbyes and ended the call. It went better than I expected. I knew Terry's work had insurance, which would pay out a good amount. I wasn't sure about the details, but his 401k would help too. I hung up the phone and felt the silence of the house again. We had many happy years here, but now it felt like a tomb. Everywhere I looked, I saw reminders of Terry. It was just memories, not his ghost, but it felt eerie. I forced myself to think clearly. No one was watching me. I opened windows to air out the chemical smell, grabbed my briefcase, and left the house quickly. At the bank, I asked for the balance on Terry's account. We had access to each other's accounts for emergencies. I had his ATM card and PIN. The teller checked the information and then fetched Arnold Johnson, the bank manager. "Mrs. Baker, could you step into my office?" he asked politely. "Sure," I said, following him. I sat across from his large, dark desk as he looked at his computer. "I'm glad you came in today," Arnold started. "I was planning to call you." "Oh? Why?" I asked, feeling anxious. "There were many transactions from your accounts over the weekend. I wanted to make sure you knew about them," he explained. "I know Terry made some donations on Friday," I said. "I didn't know about them and hoped they could be reversed. I also wanted to check his account activity." Arnold raised his eyebrows in surprise. He looked at his computer screen before answering. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Baker. The donations were made just before the cutoff time on Friday, so most of them have already gone through." "I need that money," I said. "Is there any way to get it back?" "You could try contacting the recipients and explaining the situation. They might give the money back, but there's no promise," Arnold said, looking a bit sorry. "I can print out the list of everyone who got the donations." He glanced at the screen again. "It's a long list." I thought really hard. Just asking nicely probably wouldn't work. I could take them to court, but with so many charities, the costs would be higher than the money I'd get back. Plus, my reputation would suffer. I felt sick inside and could almost see the news headline. "Greedy lawyer tries to take food and shelter from needy children." I imagined the jury thinking, so she cheated on her husband, causing him to kill himself. Now she wants to take money from orphans. Let's give her what she deserves. I'd be lucky if they didn't publicly shame me. "At least you get a big tax deduction," Arnold said, trying to lighten the mood. I stared at him, puzzled by his attempt at humor. After a few awkward seconds, he cleared his throat and looked away. "What about Terry's account?" I asked, trying to change the topic. Arnold looked at his computer, then at some documents. He sighed, adjusted his expression, and spoke to me again. "He has just enough money to keep the account open. There was a lot of activity on Friday. He paid off his credit card and then canceled it. He also paid some other bills." Arnold paused, waiting for me to say something, but I stayed silent. Then he added, "And there's a big payment to Westside Funeral Home and Crematory." That hit me hard. I knew that Funeral Home took care of Terry's parents. He had clearly planned this for a while. "What about our other accounts?" I asked. "He didn't touch those. Your joint savings account and your certificates of deposit are still fine," Arnold said after checking his computer. "Good," I said, feeling a bit relieved. "Is there anything else you need, Mrs. Baker?" he asked. "Yes," I said, pulling another folder from my briefcase. "I need to file a claim on our mortgage insurance. The bank required us to have insurance that would pay off the mortgage if anything happened to Terry or me. We got the policy through the bank, and I knew there wasn't a clause for suicide. I gave the paperwork to Arnold, who reviewed it and checked his computer. "Everything looks good," he said, pulling a form from his drawer. "You need to fill this out and return it with a copy of your husband's death certificate. A payment is due soon, so the quicker you get this back to me, the better. I'll let the home loan department know to expect it." "Thank you, Arnold," I said, putting the form in my briefcase. "You're welcome, Mrs. Baker, and I'm sorry for your loss. If you need anything, please call," Arnold said, shaking my hand. He was professional, but I felt like he was judging me. I tried to ignore it. I thanked him and left the bank, feeling a bit better. I was hungry, so I stopped for a light lunch and then went to the West Side funeral home. A slim young man with a white shirt and tie met me almost right away. His hair was neatly combed and seemed to have some hairspray. He smiled and shook my hand. "Welcome to West Side Funeral Home. I'm Alan Markham. How can I help you?" he said nicely. "I'm here about my husband, Terry Baker," I said. "Baker. That name sounds familiar. Please come to my office," Alan said, still smiling. I followed him to a nice office and accepted his offer of coffee. After giving me a cup, he looked at his computer screen for a few moments. "Yes, I see it here. I tried calling him earlier today, but couldn't reach him." "That's because he's dead," I said quietly. "I see," Alan said slowly. "I'm sorry to hear that. When did it happen?" "Friday," I said, not wanting to share more than necessary. He ordered a basic cremation service and paid in full on Friday. "It's unusual for clients to pay right before they need our services," Alan commented. "Was he very sick?" "No," I replied, still not giving more details. There was a pause before he spoke again, looking at the screen. "Well then, we need to finalize the arrangements. Do you have his death certificate?" "No, not yet," I said, knowing it could take a couple of weeks. "They took his body to the morgue on Sunday. I'll get it when the coroner is done." "When you get the certificate and they release his body, let me know and we'll proceed, Mrs. Baker," Alan said. We spent the next hour discussing the details. Terry and I weren't the type to attend church often, although he was brought up in a mainstream Protestant church, either Methodist or Lutheran, I think. To me, a memorial service seemed pointless. I thought they could just cremate him and be done. Alan asked if I wanted to keep Terry's ashes, but that idea gave me chills. "No problem. Mr. Baker paid to have his ashes placed in a columbarium if you don't want them," Alan said. Feeling down, I left the funeral home and needed to talk to someone. I looked at my watch and realized Janice might be home since she worked part-time at the county library. Taking a chance, I called her. "Hello, little sister," Janice said when she answered. "I was wondering when you'd call." "I've been busy this morning," I said. "There are so many details to handle. Can I come over? I really need to talk." "Of course," Janice said in her usual caring voice. "Richard's still at the hospital and won't be home until late, so we have plenty of time." Richard, Janice's husband, was a surgeon who often worked long hours. "Thanks, sis. I'll be there in a few minutes." We ended the call and I drove to her place. We always got along well and I knew I could tell her anything, though I wasn't sure how she'd take this. She greeted me with a smile when I arrived. "Do you want to talk about it over a cup of tea?" she kindly asked. "Sure," I replied. Janice went to the kitchen while I sat at the dining room table, feeling nervous. She came back with 2 cups of hot tea. I liked sugar in mine, so I stirred some in. I had planned to jump right into my story but found myself lost for words. "So tell me what happened," Janice said gently when she sat down. I took a sip of tea, gathering my thoughts, then told her about my weekend. Janice listened quietly as I explained how I'd taken a break from my marriage and what I found when I returned home. She didn't interrupt and kept a neutral face as I spoke. I flinched inside but kept my voice steady as I described everything that happened. Well, almost everything. I didn't tell her about my plans to shock Terry when I got home, nor did I mention the nightmares about Terry, as I didn't want her to think I was crazy. "And to think I considered you smarter than me," Janice said quietly when I finished. "You became a lawyer, married a man who worked hard to support you while you finished college. Was your weekend worth it?" Her tone was calm but felt like a slap to me. "It was just supposed to be a break," I protested. "I told Terry it didn't mean anything. It was just something I needed to do before I got too old. Just one weekend. And he overreacted." I snorted and stared at my cup instead of looking at my sister. Deep down, I knew I had just lied to her. I had told Terry it was just one weekend, but I had plans for more. Terry didn't know that at the time, so she didn't need to know either. Just one weekend, huh? And you expected him to welcome you back like nothing happened? Come on, little sister, you can't be that naive, Janice said in her calm voice. I suddenly felt resentful. I wasn't a child. I was a grown woman. Hadn't I just shown that? I had hoped Janice would agree with me, but I started to feel uneasy under her gaze. Then she asked, "So, if Terry had told you he was going away with a woman for the weekend, would you have welcomed him home with open arms?" I hadn't thought of that and wasn't expecting it from my sister. I quickly responded, "First off, Terry would never cheat on me. He wasn't that kind of man. Second, I would destroy him in a divorce, and he knew it." Even as I spoke, I realized how bad it sounded. I basically said I was that kind of woman. If I were in a courtroom, I would have called for a break. But Janice didn't even blink, as if she knew exactly what I'd say. "I see. So, it's okay for you to cheat, but not him. Is that right?" Janice asked, still calm. "Of course not," I said, feeling off balance. "He didn't need more variety when he had me. I was the one who needed it." Then I realized how much I had admitted and added quickly, "Besides, it was just once." "Was it really? Or would you have taken it further? Maybe tried to make Terry accept it? Bring home other men?" my sister asked. I stared at her, my mouth open in shock. This was coming from my easygoing older sister? It felt strange. "You don't think I know about things like that just because I work part-time at a library? Have you ever done anything like that to Richard?" I asked, feeling stunned. "Of course not. I love and respect Richard too much to do something like that, but I know others who have." Her point was clear. That I didn't respect Terry anymore was obvious, or I wouldn't have done what I did. "Oh? And what did their husbands do?" I asked, curious. "Most of them divorced their wives," Janice said, taking a calm sip of tea. "Some even went further, telling family and friends what happened and emptying the family accounts. They really got back at them. But you didn't answer my question. Was it worth risking 24 years of marriage for a fling with Ray Bland?" I felt like someone had hit me. I understood the meaning of the $24 Terry left in our joint account. $1 for every year we were married. Janice must have seen my sudden change of expression. "What's wrong?" she asked, raising her eyebrows. "Terry donated all but $24 of our joint account to children's charities," I explained, still trying to grasp this new fact. "Oh, really?" Janice responded, chuckling. "That's not funny. We had 6 months of bills in that account," I said angrily. "But you have to give him credit for style," Janice said with a slight grin. "What does that mean?" I asked, getting more upset. Didn't she understand how much trouble this put me in? At least half of that money was mine. "You denied him the one thing he always wanted, children. So he gave your money to children's charities, knowing how much you dislike kids," Janice explained, shrugging. "I don't hate children. I just never wanted any," I said sharply. "Oh, please, Helen, I've seen how you act with our kids. Why do you think they finally just left you alone? I've never seen you with a child in your arms. It's clear you don't like kids." "I just never wanted any of my own. It's my body," I said firmly. "Yes, it is. And Terry respected that, even though I'm sure you told him after the wedding." She sighed and put her cup down. "Too bad you didn't respect him as much, huh?" "That's not true. I respected and loved him," I protested weakly. "Really? If that's true, I'd hate to see what you would have done if you didn't love him," Janice said. "I also can't help but notice how calm you are about his death." That hurt. "What am I supposed to do? I'm the one left behind. I have responsibilities. I have to pick up the pieces and move on. Breaking down won't help," I said, feeling more irritated. "No, it won't. But it might help you cope with his death. You've never been one to show much emotion, have you? You didn't even cry when Dad died." There was a long, awkward pause. Then Janice said, looking me in the eyes, "Which means you are either holding it all in and might explode one day, or you are just numb and it will come out later." "Showing emotion has never been my strong suit," I replied softly, pushing the discomfort away. "Yes, I know. So what now?" Janice asked after another moment of silence. "I guess I have no choice but to move on, right?" I asked, letting some bitterness into my tone. "No, you don't," Janice replied. "But Richard and I will be here for you if you need us. We may not approve of your choices, but you are family and we still care about you. Thanks, Janice. I appreciate that, I said, truly grateful that my older sister still cared for me, even if she thought I didn't deserve it. We spent the next hour talking about other things, which helped me feel a little better. Richard is on his way home, Janice said, glancing at her phone. Would you like to stay for dinner? It'll just be leftovers, though. Your leftovers are always good, I told her. I'd love to stay. We had a nice dinner and talked about everything except the big problem, which suited me fine. Richard didn't talk much, but was at least somewhat sympathetic. When he walked into the house, he nodded to me and exchanged a quick look with Janice. They communicated silently in that deep, married way. I looked away to hide my expression, wondering when Terry and I had lost that connection. Thinking about it wouldn't help me get my money back or pay the bills. We ate lasagna, which Janice always made too much of, and then had some of her homemade apple pie. I always enjoyed her pies and gladly took a big slice. We finished the evening with a small glass of wine and some light conversation. Realizing I needed to leave, I thanked Janice for the meal and headed for the door. Janice stopped me and hugged me tightly. "We do love you, Helen," she murmured. "Thanks," I stammered, surprised. "I love you too. If you need anything, just call," Richard said softly. "Thank you," I replied. We said our goodbyes and I drove back to the hotel. In my room, I turned on the TV for some background noise, changed into my nightgown, and collapsed on the bed. Though my eyes were on the TV, my mind replayed my talk with Janice. She was right, about everything. Was I really the uncaring person she said I was? "Yes," I heard Terry say. I turned quickly toward the voice, surprised. He was leaning against the wall, looking at me. Why are you here?" I asked, confused. "That's easy. You fell asleep," he said with a small smirk. "I did?" I didn't remember. The last thing I recalled was someone talking on the TV. "Are you going to haunt all my dreams?" I asked, feeling a cold fear in my stomach. "I wouldn't last if I couldn't sleep." "That's the plan," he replied with a twisted smile, showing parts of his skull. "So you really think I'm an uncaring, selfish person?" I shot back, trying to sound braver than I felt. "Yes," Terry said, unfazed. "Your actions make it clear. Look," he nodded at the TV. Surprised, I looked at the screen. It showed moments from my life, kind of like a movie. After a few minutes, a tear threatened to fall as I watched scenes from our marriage. We were so young and happy then. As the movie went on, I saw changes, mostly in myself, I admitted. Terry was always supporting me. He worked hard so I could finish school. We saved every penny, eating grilled burgers he cooked on an old gas stove in our tiny apartment. We didn't have much back then, but it didn't matter. We had each other. I got a job after graduating and things began to change. We saved enough to buy a house when the market was good. There were more years of saving, but things got better. As my career grew, I thought kids would hold me back. I couldn't look away. It was clear how self-centered I became. Over time, I began ignoring Terry's work, his concerns, and his dreams. I wasn't thrilled about getting pregnant from the start, but I hid that from Terry. It was my decision. When he brought up having kids, I kept putting him off, using my career as an excuse. "You should have been honest about not wanting kids from the beginning," Terry said from somewhere out of sight, his voice so emotionless it gave me chills. "You knew I wanted kids," he growled as we watched. "I'm sorry," I mumbled as the movie played. I saw a wall grow between us as time passed. Terry always supported me, putting my wants over his own. At the same time, I saw myself losing respect for him. When I saw that one of my deposits was more than his whole monthly pay, things got worse. He made good money, but I made more. Living better with both our salaries didn't seem to matter to me. My motto was, what's mine is mine, and what's his is mine too. By then, it was clear I was in charge of our marriage. Though Terry resented it, and I could see just how much now, he kept quiet. He was committed to our marriage and to me. I saw him realize on our 12th anniversary that he could manage fine with his own money. But he saw divorce as failure and didn't want to ruin the balance between us. Me? I enjoyed being the boss. Maybe that's why I started flirting with Ray. By the time the affair started, I had no respect left for Terry. "Yeah, you are," Terry hissed. It was a late response to my apology. Where was this strong Terry when I needed him? Maybe if he had stood up to me, I wouldn't have left last Friday. Was it only 3 days ago? It felt longer. Then the alarm beeped. I turned it off and looked at the wall where Terry had stood. He was gone. Was it just a dream? Or was Terry right? And this was my new reality. I got out of bed, did what I had to do, showered, and brushed my teeth. I hardly recognized the old face in the mirror. I looked awful and felt even worse. Though I had slept, I felt drained. I packed, went downstairs for breakfast, and checked out. The house smelled better than yesterday, but it still felt like a tomb. The master bedroom felt like a fridge, and passing the couch felt like touching ice. I shivered harder at the thought of sitting on it. I had no idea what Terry would do next. Could he do anything other than haunt my dreams? Did I want to know? I walked around, keeping busy by going through Terry's belongings. Then it hit me. I needed to talk to Jerry Smith. He was the estate planning expert at our firm. I knew he might be upset that I told the bank about Terry's death, but I wasn't too worried. "I was wondering when you'd call," he said when he picked up. I wondered what else he knew about my situation besides Terry being dead. I decided not to ask and kept things strictly business. I told him what I had already done, and he reassured me he'd handle it all. This was a perk of working at the law firm and would take a huge load off my mind. "Thanks, Jerry. I appreciate it," I said. I tried to sound sincere, but probably just sounded tired. "No problem. That's what they pay me for. Can you gather all your financial stuff and bring it to me this afternoon?" Jerry asked. "Yeah. How about 3 o'clock?" I replied, checking the clock. "Works for me," Jerry said. I spent the rest of the morning collecting everything, including a copy of Terry's will. I felt a bit uneasy, as I felt cold drafts, even though no doors or windows were open. Sometimes I heard the stairs creak as if someone was walking. I told myself it was just nerves and kept going until I had everything. A hot shower calmed me down, and I changed into something nicer than jeans, but not as formal as my business suits before leaving the house. When I got to the office, people gave me odd looks and then quickly looked away. They must have heard what Ray and I did over the weekend. My cheeks felt hot, and I hurried on. "Going casual today, Helen?" Wilson asked from behind me. He was smiling, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm here to see Jerry about Terry's final arrangements," I said, feeling defensive. "Smartest thing you've done since Friday," he replied. "When you're done, can you come by my office for a few minutes?" "Of course," I said, suddenly worried about my job. He was old-fashioned but the managing partner, and I knew an order when I heard one. I finally reached Jerry's office. He waved me in with a forced smile. We shook hands and he offered me coffee. I handed him my paperwork and we went over everything. "Everything seems in order," Jerry said after reviewing my papers. "I'll take care of the rest. Is there anything else?" "Yes, I need to update my will and living trust," I told him. "That makes sense," he said, pulling my file. "Your husband was listed as your beneficiary, executor, and medical proxy." "I want my sister, Janice Hopkins, listed instead," I said, "and give her power of attorney just in case." "Okay, just write it in and sign. I'll make the updates. It should be done in a day or so," Jerry said. "Thanks, Jerry," I replied. We wrapped up our meeting. Then I went to Wilson's office. His secretary waved me in with a nasty look. "Helen, come in. Have a seat," Wilson said with a warm smile. "How are you holding up?" he asked kindly after I sat down. "It's been tough," I answered carefully. "You look tired," Wilson observed with concern. "It hasn't been easy," I admitted. I didn't dare tell him about my dreams, if they were just dreams. Wilson nodded. "You're probably wondering why I asked to see you," he said. "The senior partners aren't happy. Your husband sent emails to almost everyone here. It's likely the news will leak outside soon. Your credibility, both personal and professional, has taken a hit. The only reason you haven't been fired is your exemplary record over the past 20 years. I thought about what Wilson said and what he didn't say but hinted at. I made a decision I hoped I wouldn't regret. "Maybe I should resign," I said quietly, my stomach in knots. Wilson said nothing for a moment, pretending to think. He nodded. "As much as I hate losing you, that might be best. But given your long service and excellent record, I'm sure the partners would let you stay on the payroll for the rest of the month. That should let you handle your husband's final affairs. We'll put together a decent severance package. You're smart and driven, one of the best lawyers I've seen. I'm sure you'll land on your feet." "Thank you, Mr. Bledsoe. I appreciate that," I said softly. I felt a bit like I was in a soap opera. "Of course. Maybe you should think about a change of scenery." "Have you ever been to Boise?" he asked, his voice calm and steady. "Boise? In Idaho? No, I haven't." "Why?" I asked, amazed by this sudden shift in the talk. "An old friend of mine runs a company there. He needs someone with your skills. If you want, I can tell him about you." "Okay," I said, feeling unsure. "Great, I'll let him know." "Here's his card," Wilson said, giving me a card. I glanced at it, then put it in my purse. I could call Ray, but a part of me never wanted to see him again. I braved my curiosity. "Can I ask about Ray? What's going to happen to him?" He looked at me for a long time, then seemed to decide something. "As you know, Helen, I can't go into details, privacy issues and all. Let's just say Mr. Bland has lost all his chances with the senior partners. You might not know, but you're not the first person whose marriage he's ruined. That's why he got moved here after his divorce. His ex-wife found him with someone from work. It was a rough divorce." He looked down and doodled on his desk. "The lawsuit made us keep him on the payroll to cover hefty alimony." He almost whispered the last bit, like he was lost in thought. "I didn't know any of that," I said quietly, shocked. I knew his bad reputation, which is why I went after him, but not this. Wow. "Well, I have a meeting to go to. I'm really sorry for your loss, Helen, and I'm sure we'll see you before you leave," Wilson said as he stood up. That meant our meeting was over. "I'll be back," I said. "I have some papers to sign. Thanks for everything," I added as we shook hands. I fought tears as I rushed out of the office, steering clear of everyone who I was sure was watching me leave. I broke down crying once I got to my car. I loved this job and all the people here. Worse, I had been here for over 20 years. The thought of moving to Boise felt like being sent far away as punishment. I calmed down enough to drive, but it was still hard because tears kept blurring my vision. I almost had a couple of accidents. When I got home, I sat on the love seat, buried my face in my hands, and cried over losing the job I loved. I cried until I heard a thump from the living room. Surprised, I looked around, not knowing what caused the noise. Then I saw it. A framed photo from our wedding lay face down on the table. I felt chills. Shaking, I picked it up and saw the glass was broken, as if it had been hit. It felt like a storm cloud was over me. I almost threw up as I realized I was crying more for my job than for my husband. Scared, I tossed the photo on the couch and looked around. I couldn't understand how it fell. Then it hit me. This had to be Terry's doing. I went from scared to mad to terrified to furious. "Leave me alone," I yelled at the empty room. "You're dead. Move on. Stop messing with me." Suddenly, the room got colder and darker. I almost expected things to fly off the walls and thought I heard weird laughter from the stairs. I couldn't stay in that house by myself. I grabbed my phone and called Janice. "Hey, sis, how's it going?" She answered cheerfully. "Not good. Can I stay with you tonight?" "Please?" I begged, my voice shaky. Her voice turned serious. "Of course you can. We'll get the guest room ready. Is everything okay?" she asked. "No, it's not. I'll tell you when I get there. Thanks," I said. We ended the call, and I rushed upstairs to pack my overnight bag again. I threw things into my bag quickly. I had to get out before Terry did something else. I walked down the stairs, holding the rail tightly, afraid Terry would push me. Then I ran to the garage, tossed my stuff in the car, and left. If this were a movie, I'd leave tire marks. Janice met me at the door, and I fell into her arms, crying. She hugged me and tried to comfort me. She finally got me to sit on her couch and talk. "What happened? Did someone break into your house?" she asked, worried. "It's worse," I said, feeling hopeless. "It's Terry." "Terry? He's dead. What can he do?" Janice asked, confused. I told her everything that happened the last 2 nights and at the house. She listened quietly as I babbled my story. "He's trying to drive me crazy. I know it," I cried. "You've been through a lot. Maybe you just need some rest," Janice said, trying to calm me. "No, you don't understand," I said, shaking my head. He said in his suicide note that he hoped his face would haunt me whenever I closed my eyes. And it has. I haven't slept well since Sunday. And now, this. To top it off, I resigned from my job to avoid getting fired. I cried again. Part of me thought I couldn't cry anymore, but I was wrong. Oh no, what will you do about your house and bills? I've got some money coming in and the insurance will cover the mortgage. I'm employed until the end of the month and I've been promised some severance pay. But I can't stay in that house anymore. You don't understand. Terry hates me. He'll harm me if I stay there. I was on the verge of panic. Come on, sis. You're a logical person. That's a bit much, don't you think? How can a dead man possibly hurt you? Janice asked calmly. She was trying to get me to see sense, but she hadn't experienced what I did. But you weren't there, I insisted. No, I wasn't. Tell you what, I'll take your things upstairs and make you a hot cup of chamomile tea and a grilled cheese sandwich. That should calm you down, and then we can talk, okay? Okay, I said, suddenly feeling like a scared child hiding from a monster. Janice took my things upstairs, then went to the kitchen. She made 2 cups of tea and 2 grilled cheese sandwiches. She brought them on a tray and sat with me. I sipped the tea, sweetened with honey, and took a bite of the sandwich. It was delicious and brought back memories of our childhood. I began to relax and felt much better. Are you feeling better now? Janice asked gently. Yes, much, I replied with a deep, grateful sigh. Thank you. You're welcome. Have you told anyone else about seeing Terry? No. Are you kidding? I'd get locked up. Not necessarily. You've been through a lot these last few days. Seeing Terry must have been a big shock. Maybe you should take a few days to get away. I can talk to Richard and see if you can stay in our lake cabin. A few days in the country might help, Janice suggested. Maybe you're right. Wilson also said I should get away. He suggested I go to Boise. Boise? Why Boise? Janice asked, surprised. A friend of his runs a law firm there. Apparently he needs a good attorney, I explained. Are you going to take him up on it? Janice asked. I don't know. I should at least call him. I'd hate to leave here, though. You and Richard are my only family now. I took another sip of tea before continuing. By the way, I changed my will and trust. You are now my sole beneficiary and the executor of my trust. I've also given you power of attorney just in case something happens to me. I hope you don't mind. No, of course not, Janice said. But you're still young. I expect you to be around for a very long time. I hope so. But I like to be prepared, I said. We ate and drank in silence for a few minutes. I've really messed everything up, haven't I? I whispered. You haven't helped your situation, Janice said gently. I guess I wanted everything my way, I remarked sarcastically. And look at what it's cost you, Janice said quietly. She didn't have to say it. I already knew what my choices had cost me. My husband of 24 years is gone, my career is nearly over, and I can't even sleep well, all because I listened to office gossip and convinced myself I had to be with Ray Bland. Yeah, I sighed sadly. But it's too late to cry over spilled milk, as Mom used to say. You need to pull yourself together, little sister. You're right, I told her. Maybe I'll take you up on your offer and get my head straight. Right now, I just need some sleep. Suddenly, I yawned so big it made my jaw ache. The tea had done its job and I felt my eyelids getting heavy. Let's get you upstairs, Janice said, before you fall asleep here on the couch. She helped me stand and walked me up to the guest room. The bed was ready, and I barely managed to get into my nightgown. Janice pulled the covers over me after I collapsed on the bed. Thank you, I murmured to my big sister, for everything. Janice smiled and kissed my forehead. You're welcome. Now get some sleep. She closed the door when she left, and I quickly drifted off to sleep. So you thought you could escape me by running to your sister, I heard Terry's voice say sarcastically. I looked around and saw the bedroom filled with a thick gray mist. Terry stepped out of the closet, pieces of his head falling as he walked. Why are you here? Why can't you leave me alone? I asked desperately. Leave you alone? Ha! I'll never leave you alone, Terry growled, his broken face turning even uglier. That was you in the house, wasn't it? With the picture. Yes, it took a lot of energy to do that, but now that I know I can do it, I'll do it more often, Terry sneered. Please, can't you just leave me alone? You're dead. You're supposed to move on, I begged. Yes, I am dead. But whose fault is that? You pulled the trigger. I didn't force you, I shot back. Yes, I did. It was either me or your boyfriend, but he was too scared to leave his car, Terry snapped. You were going to hurt Ray? I was horrified. My Terry, my kind, gentle Terry, had turned into someone who could kill. His face turned angry. First, I was going to shoot him, make sure he couldn't hurt anyone else. Then I would have killed him. Would you have killed me? I thought about it. Really. But that would have been too easy. I wanted you to suffer. It didn't have to be like this. His eyes flashed red, and I held back a scream. So how should it have been, dearest? He yelled, and I shrank back. Should I have just gone along with your cheating and lost all my self-respect? Should I have left, letting your lawyers destroy me in court? Should I have run away with what money I could grab, always hiding from private detectives, or burn down the house and end up in prison? I should have talked about all these great options with my family and friends. Oh wait, I had no family, and I spent all my time being a good husband. I had colleagues, but no real friends other than you. Your legal skills left me with no good choices, so I did the one thing you never expected. It let me keep a bit of pride and get some payback, so I pulled the trigger because it was the only choice I had. And now, my blood is on your hands. Look. I looked at my hands and saw dark red blood, thick drops falling onto Janice's bedspread. I pulled away in horror. You might not see it during the day, but it's there, and nothing can clean it off, Terry added. He shook, and I heard his teeth knock together. More pieces of his ruined head fell, but vanished before they hit the ground. In a hoarse, pained whisper, he said, I can't move on. I have unfinished business. I can't rest until it's done. He seemed to grow darker, and I almost screamed. By the way, was your thing with Bland worth this? You lost me, and you lost that nice job, too. I know that job meant more to you than I did. Look, Terry, I'm sorry, okay? I shouldn't have done it. I get it now. Go away. Leave me alone, I said weakly. I was exhausted and hated the things he was making me face. I don't think you really get it, Terry replied more softly. You're right. You shouldn't have done it. You should have never even thought about it. But you still think you deserve whatever you want, no matter who gets hurt. It's still all about you. And I won't leave you alone. Ever. Please, Terry, I can't take any more, I cried as tears ran down my face. Well, you know what they say. One in one hand and see what you get in the other. I wanted a loving wife. Where did that get me? Enjoy your miserable life, Terry sneered before laughing crazily. He went back into the closet, and the mist followed him like a vacuum. The blood on my hands and the bedspread disappeared. I fell onto the pillow, tears streaming down my face. The next thing I knew, the sun was shining through the window. I got up, smelled bacon from downstairs, and checked the bedspread, but there was no blood. I went into the bathroom, did my morning routine, got dressed, and went downstairs. I didn't feel better, but I didn't feel worse either. Good morning, Richard said cheerfully, sitting at the table with his coffee. Janice is almost done with breakfast. Want some coffee? Thanks, I will, I said. I greeted Janice, who was piling bacon on a plate, grabbed my coffee, and wished for a double espresso. I sat at the table. How did you sleep last night? Richard asked, looking at my tired face. Not too well, I admitted. You saw him again? Janice asked, putting bacon and eggs on the table. I glanced at her and then at Richard. He looked concerned, not shocked. For a moment I felt betrayed because Janice had shared my secret with Richard. Then I understood. They were a real couple and shared everything. Yes, I replied. Am I going crazy? I asked Richard. I'm a surgeon, not a psychiatrist, he said with a small smile. But from what Janice told me, it sounds like you've been through a lot of mental pain and stress. With everything about Terry and your job, maybe you're right, I said quickly, not wanting to talk about my problems again. But if you like, I can talk to our hospital's psychiatrist. She's very good. Maybe she can help you. I might take you up on that, I said. We each grabbed some bacon and eggs and started eating. Janice was the best cook I knew next to my mom, and her eggs were delicious. We also talked about you staying at the lake cabin for a few days. It might help you relax, Richard said. That would be nice, I said. I knew the medical examiner wouldn't release Terry's body until the end of the week, and I still had 3 weeks before I was jobless. Maybe a few days at the lake would help. Good. Then it's settled. I'll give you a key to the place before I head out. Will you be okay driving up there? Richard asked. I'll be fine, I said, trying to smile. We finished our breakfast, and I helped Janice clear the table. Richard took the key to their cabin from his pocket and gave it to me. I had been there many times and knew the way. "Enjoy your stay," Richard said with a smile. "Thank you both." "For everything," I said, hugging each of them. "It's our pleasure," Janice replied, "and call if you need anything." After saying goodbye, I packed my things and left. I thought about going home to get a few more things, but decided not to. After yesterday, I didn't want to set foot in that place again. I stopped at Walmart and grabbed a few supplies, then got back on the road. I was driving on the 2-lane road outside town, my windows down and the radio playing loud. The wind in my hair kept me awake, and I was looking forward to a few days of peace. I was only half an hour away from the lake when it happened. "Nice day for a drive, isn't it?" I heard from the passenger seat. Shocked, I looked over and saw Terry sitting there looking out the window. I could see through a hole in his head. "What are you doing here?" I almost screamed. "You fell asleep at the wheel." "Not safe," Terry said, looking at me. "Keep your eyes on the road before you hit the intersect." Suddenly, everything went crazy as a big truck hit my door. The crash made the car spin, and another truck hit me from the other side. My car ended up in a ditch, upside down, and I was stuck between the airbags. "See you later," Terry said before I blacked out. Epilogue, 25 years later. "Hello, Mrs. Hopkins," the cheerful receptionist said as Janice signed the guest book. "Hello, Amy," Janice replied. "How is Miss Baker today?" she asked April Callahan, the head nurse in Helen's ward, who had just arrived at the desk. Janice had made this trip every week for the last 25 years. The same. She just sits in her wheelchair watching TV or looking out the window. Nights are still the worst for her. She says she sees her dead husband in her dreams, April said sadly. Janice knew about that, but she also knew Helen had come to terms with it over the years. Terry visiting her in dreams didn't scare her like it used to. "Something strange happened the other day, though," April added as they walked to Helen's room. "What's that?" Janice asked. "If I hadn't seen it, I wouldn't believe it," April began. "You know the picture she has of her and her husband on the shelf?" "Yes, I know the picture. It was taken the day they were married," Janice said with a touch of sad nostalgia. I was in her room, feeding her lunch, when the picture suddenly fell forward, face down. "It didn't just fall over. It slammed down hard and the glass broke," April said. "I almost jumped out of my skin when it happened." "Maybe there was a draft," Janice suggested carefully, feeling a shiver. "No, all the windows were closed and no fans were on," April replied firmly. "That is odd," Janice said. She remembered Helen saying the same thing happened in her house the day before the accident. That crash had left Helen in a coma, and she never fully recovered. "She's mentioned things moving in her room before, but I always thought it was someone on staff while cleaning. I've never seen it happen." "But the strangest thing was Helen's reaction," April added. "Oh?" Janice asked. "Yes." She just smiled, looked at me and said, "He's still mad at me." "Does that make any sense to you?" April asked. "Strangely enough, it does," Janice said with a sad smile. "I'll tell you about it one of these days." "I can't wait to hear that story," April replied. "I have rounds to make, but the front office wants to see you about her benefits before you leave. I'll talk to you later." "Okay," Janice said. She got to her sister's room and saw the frail 71-year-old woman sitting in her wheelchair looking out the window. She remembered the accident like it was yesterday. Helen was on her way to the lake cabin when she was hit by a big truck and then another truck coming from the other direction. The police report said Helen must have fallen asleep at the wheel and drove through a red light. Officers said Helen had to be cut out of her car using the jaws of life and was lucky to be alive. The car had slowly filled with water from the ditch, and she almost drowned. She and Richard had blamed themselves for a long time. They should have driven her to the cabin knowing she was that tired. The police report made it clear that it was her fault for not stopping at the light, so the trucking company was not to blame. Luckily, Helen still had her law firm's health plan, which paid for her hospital bills, but the health benefits didn't cover everything for her long-term care. Janice, now handling Helen's finances, had to use all of her sister's money, including both their 401ks and the insurance money from Terry's firm. Janice also sold Helen's house after paying off the mortgage. She used most of that money to cover Helen's medical bills and other expenses. Helen was now on Medicare, but she still needed to pay for things like medicine. The medical costs from the last 25 years had nearly drained all of Helen's money. She knew that if her sister lived much longer, she might need to move to a less nice nursing home. "Look what I brought for you," Janice said, pulling a new blanket from her big bag. "I just finished it yesterday." "That looks so nice," Helen whispered. "Thank you. I thought it would help keep you warm at night." "I'm sure it will," Helen said, looking out the window. "Can you keep a secret?" she asked. "Of course," Janice replied. "That weekend I spent with Ray, I haven't even told Terry yet, but I realize now that it wasn't worth it," Helen said, as a single tear rolled down her face. The room got a bit colder and the heavy hospital bed shook slightly. Janice looked at the bed, scared, then back at her sister. "I think he already knows, dear."
What's up, story lovers? This is the Story Guy, and if you're hungry for crazy tales and mind-blowing narratives, you've come to the right place. Don't forget to smash that subscribe button so you don't miss out on our weekly dose of crazy cheating stories, fun fiction and gut-ripping comedy from around the world. But that's not all. We also create our own original stories, and trust me, you won't find these anywhere else. Want even more spine-tingling reads? Head down to the description and grab our exclusive story collections. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.